Alright, what's up guys? We have a brand new event starting in a few days here. We've got the monster type event. Now it's not all monster types, it's specific to only two monster types, which are fairies and fiends. You can do a combination of both, or you could just play them individually. But essentially it's just these two monster types and none of the other monster types in the game. I'm going to show you the best decks to play in this event. Right now. Alright, so first up we've got an easy one here. We've got DDDs. DDDs is a 100% fiend based deck, and while this used to be like a deck that you can mix a lot of other engines into, you don't even need to do that anymore because the deck plays really well just pure, just by itself, including the extra deck, which is also can be played very well pure. The deck can put up negates, interruptions. The only thing they changed was that Flame Genghis, King Genghis is limited to 1, so you'd have to reduce that. But other than that, the deck is literally exactly at full power, exactly the same exact way that it would be played regularly. And if we're being honest, it's actually kind of a low rarity deck. If you look at it, there's not a lot of URs, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, reduce one of these, 4 URs in the entire deck. And then everything else is SRs. I mean, that's pretty good. 4 URs and you have this deck to play in the regular game mode afterwards if you want to. It's a pendulum deck, but it's not just a pendulum deck. It literally uses every single mechanic, which is really cool. That's another awesome part about this deck. It fuses, and it fuses similarly to Tier Limits, where it uses the graveyard to fuse. So it has fusions, it has synchros, it has Exceed monsters, and of course it's got its Link monster, which is really strong. Now the only thing I will say is this deck is a very high skill deck, so if you are not too bright, this is not the deck for you. There are other decks on this list that will probably be easier to play than this deck, but generally speaking this is a really cool deck, and just generally a really cool option. I would say definitely give it a try. Alright, next up we've got DarkLord. DarkLord is actually a really cool deck. It's in the brand new pack and it's got some new support that's really good. One thing I will say is you can definitely mix it with Fabled, which is these cards right here. I'm using Fabled Raven, but there are other Fabled cards that you can use because they play very similarly. The only thing you're really missing in DarkLord is the danger monsters, which sucks. The only danger monster that is a fiend is Chupacabra. All of the other danger monsters are just a variety of types, like reptile and like they're all over the place. Beast and dragon, and actually I don't think there's a dragon, but they're basically all over the place. This is the thing about this deck. What is cool is if you do play the Fabled cards, you have access to some of the synchro monsters, which is cool because a lot of the Fabled cards are tuners. And that is really awesome. But overall, this deck is very strong, mostly because you can make Appaloosa extraordinarily easily. This deck special summons a ton. You still have a lot of dark support, like Allure of Darkness and stuff, so the deck still has a lot of firepower ready to go. You can Underworld Goddess to get rid of your opponent's board. You have Mudcracker, which is a really good new card that's just good in the deck. And like I said, this deck is overall, the only issue with it I could say is it's a bit expensive, just because like things like the Field Spell are URs and the Rainbow is a UR and Graph is a UR. But if you're already opening the new packs anyway, then it's really not that expensive. Also the new Graph is a UR. Like there's a lot of URs in this deck, unfortunately. But I mean, it's not the end of the world because, like I said, if you're already opening these packs regardless, then you might have a lot of the new DarkLord stuff regardless. But overall, I think it's a really strong deck. Definitely worth considering. Next up, we've got Labrynth. Labrynth is probably the best control deck in the entire... Honestly, just even not included in this event, it's probably the strongest control deck in the game right now. Just because it's got its new support, which is the Silver Castle, and then it's also got the new Labrynth card, which is the Big Welcome Labrynth. Both cards are really strong. Probably the best control deck in the game right now because Eldritch just relies so much on floodgates and doesn't really have like a really good resource engine. And this deck doesn't lose to Bystials the way Eldritch does. So that's just in the general, obviously, in the general thing. But overall, this deck in this particular event didn't get hit at all. I mean, it's an all fiend deck, and it's an all fiend deck that doesn't really use the extra deck, so you don't have to stress about crafting new stuff. Yeah, it's a really strong deck, probably the best control deck in the game in general, and in this event, it's definitely the best control deck in the game. Just because absolutely nothing got hit, everything is 100% at full power. and you can play it exactly the same way as you were playing it previously. It's actually an incredibly strong deck. Literally everything's the same other than a few floodgates got hit. Like, you can't run a skill drain, for example. Skill drain is very good in this deck. You can't run it, but it's not the end of the world again because you essentially have everything else. I think Eradicator Epidemic Virus is gone, but you can play Full Force, and both of these have more than, well, Silver Castle has more than 2,000 defense, so you can just tribute this, and also the Ariana is also more than 2,000 defense, so she works perfectly with the Full Force Virus, and this is obviously very good against a lot of just decks in general, so you can still run viruses. Yeah, the only issue with this deck is there is kind of like a bit of a luxury tax, because all of the new cards essentially are all URs on top of the Welcome Labrynth originally being a UR, and then of course the Silver Castle being a UR. Like, there's so many URs to deal with. But the fortunate thing is your extra deck essentially doesn't matter, because it can literally be, you never use your extra deck with this deck anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. And overall, this is a good deck to invest in, because you're getting a good deck for the event and a good deck just in general. Alright, next up we have DarkLord, or I should say DarkLord Despia. These two decks are basically, the whole point of the deck is to summon out the first DarkLord. This card is insane. It's just a really strong boss monster. These two decks have an unbelievable amount of synergy. Like, generally, if you're playing Dark Lords, most of the time when you see a person playing Dark Lords, they're typically playing Despias with it, because Despia is a really strong fusion engine in general. And then it's very good with Dark Lords, because they're all fairies, they're all dark fairies, and then all of the Despia monsters are all dark fiends and fairies. Like, it's just so good. It's not any of the branded stuff, it's literally just the Despia stuff, because obviously you can't play branded fusion since you can't send Fallen of Albaz, he's a dragon, but you do play the rest of the stuff, which is, you know, the fusion engine. So typically what you do is you summon a Luber, but instead of searching branded fusion, you actually just search Despian Theater, and this is basically like a polymerization on a field spell, which is quite strong. And then it basically recovers you a monster on top of that. Also, you can make all the cool stuff like Masquerade, and you can go into Pro-Kezian, and all of the other stuff. But most of the time you're making the first DarkLord. This is another deck that I'd say one of the issues is really the rarity, but if you already own Despia, this might be a very good deck, because you really only have to get, maybe you can even get away with one copy of the first DarkLord, and then 2 Superbias. You basically craft 3 URs, and you have this deck. If you don't already, obviously if you already have Despia, because I know a lot of you already have Despia, because it's one of the most popular decks, regardless, and it's been very popular for the last few formats, like many formats. So it could be a very cool deck, a very cool option to play. Next up we've got Agents. Agents is a very good deck, actually. Now that I'm saying it, it's actually a very good deck to play with Sprites typically, because it does have, you can bring back the Agent Mystery Earth, and then also you've got the Diviner of the Herald. So there are some good level 2s that you can use quite intelligently, but this deck is very good. It's a pure fairy deck, which is awesome. Yeah, it's like a really strong deck that you can use. It's 100% fairies. You basically rely on making your synchro monster, which is a very strong monster, which is not this. This one's also very good, which is the level 5 synchro, but also you can make the level 10 synchro, which this guy is actually really strong. And you've got the Link monster, and you can make Celestial. You really don't have to play 3 of that. That's a UR. But yeah, you can make Master Hyperion, fill up your extra deck with other stuff that you have here. But yeah, overall, it's a very strong deck. This is a combo deck, which there aren't actually there are a few good combo options like DDDs and stuff like that, but this is very much a combo deck, and you have both regular Master Hyperion, and you've got the Master Flare Hyperion, which is the extra deck version of him. But yeah, this is actually a very strong deck, very cool deck. I definitely would say give this one a try. If you already have most of the cards, it's good. The one drawback to this deck, and I think it's a pretty big drawback, is there's a lot of URs on the screen, right? We've got Master Hyperion, this Parshath is also a UR, the regular Master Hyperion, there's quite a few Diviners UR, like it's a few URs in this, which is unfortunate. And actually I should add this, which is the Elder Entity, because you can send it with Diviner. But yeah, there's quite a few URs, unfortunately, in this, and that's probably one of the bigger things that's holding this deck back. Alright, so the next deck, and I only have a handful of decks to show you guys, is Magical Musketeers. This is another all-fiend deck. It's essentially a full power. Basically what it does is it's a column-based deck, meaning when you activate a card in a Magical Musketeers column, you get to get additional effects. Plus, you have quick plays and stuff you can activate from your hand, which is really cool. And then if your opponent activates things in your column, that's also good. Let me remove this, and I'll probably bump this up here, because some of these are pre-ban list. So we'll just bump some stuff out, bump some stuff up. There you go. But yeah, it's a very good deck. You use it with the Runic engine, which is actually quite good. This deck actually has some really good synergy with Runic. Just like the Runic cards, you can activate all of the Magical Musketeer cards from your hand, just like I said, just like the Runic cards. One of the benefits of using this deck is it's actually quite low rarity. Again, the only thing you need is one copy of Runic Fountain and Magical Musketeer Max. Of course, you do need Runic Tip, one Runic Tip, because it is limited to one. So basically, yeah, you just need a handful of different cards like that. You have to replace a few different things here because I obviously bumped some stuff out and down. But now the deck is just like that. Yeah, it's a pretty low rarity deck, I'd say. It's not a huge investment cost. Definitely worth trying, and at least knowing that you will occasionally play against this deck, being that it does use the Runic engine. It is quite annoying. Alright, last and certainly not least, we have Fluffles. This deck is another fusion based deck. It's very, very strong. It's essentially at full power. Almost nothing really got hit. You play it with the Despia engine, which is really good. I've seen a lot of people play Eldritch the Golden Lord in this deck, but you don't need to do that because you're playing it. Yeah, you don't need to play Eldritch the Golden Lord in this variant of the deck, which is really cool. But the deck is really, really strong. For this particular event, I'd recommend Red Reboot. It'll make OTKing Labrynth a lot better. But this is pretty much a going second deck. Like I said, quite strong. The only, I'd say, real drawback to it is that it's kind of expensive on the URs, right? You've got Tiger, which is a UR. Bear is somewhat optional, but it's a UR. You've got Kraken, which is another UR. You've got some of the Despia stuff, and then main deck is pretty clean in terms of UR. Like, you have no real URs to worry about, other than like the side deck stuff, like not side deck cards, but like the staple sorts of cards. But yeah, it's a little bit heavy on the URs in the extra deck department, but other than that, this deck is actually really, really strong. It might even be one of the best decks in the entire event, because this deck it wants to go second, whereas every other deck in the event wants to go first. So whether you win the coin flip or lose the coin flip, you're going to be able to go second. And then you have Harpy's Feather Duster and Red Reboot and Lightning Storm. You have all of these great blowout cards on top of just a really, really strong resource loop / engine, which is really awesome. Like I said, the only thing that's kind of annoying is that it's a little bit on the expensive side between all of the URs that you need out of your extra deck. But overall, it's a very strong deck. This is the last deck I'm going to show you guys. If you have any recommendations or any decks that I should have added that I forgot, it's entirely possible I forgot something. Just put it in the comment section down below. Let me know what you're playing, and thank you for watching. La, 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 la.